One moment she was there. The next she was gone. No scream, no struggle, no sign of where she went. It happened in broad daylight in one of the most visited national parks in America. The year was 1981, and 14-year-old Stacy Arras had just arrived at Yosemite's remote Sunrise High Sierra camp with her father. She told him she wanted to take a quick walk to snap some photos. Minutes later, Stacy vanished, and what followed became one of the most baffling mysteries in Yosemite's history. If you love stories of unsolved mysteries and chilling disappearances, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss the next case. After the long horseback ride through Yosemite's breathtaking trails, the group finally reached the Sunrise High Sierra camp, a rustic cluster of cabins surrounded by endless forest, sharp cliffs, and silence. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of pine needles and distant mountain streams. Stacy Arras, only 14 years old, was tired but full of energy. She wasn't like the older hikers around her. To her, this trip wasn't just about endurance, it was about discovery. She wanted to capture everything with her camera. When the group began to settle in, Stacy turned to her father. She told him she wanted to stretch her legs and explore a little before dinner. In her hands she carried her small camera, a typical teenage curiosity wanting to preserve memories. But this simple request, a short walk to take pictures, would change everything. Stacy started down the trail toward a nearby lake. It wasn't far. In fact, it was visible from camp, just a short distance, less than a quarter-mile away. An older man from the group decided to join her, perhaps out of politeness, perhaps to make sure she wasn't alone. Together they walked the rocky path. But soon the man grew tired and decided to turn back. He waved to Stacy as she continued on. It would be the last time anyone ever saw her alive. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Stacy didn't return. At first no one worried. After all, what could happen on a short walk to a visible lake? But as the evening shadows stretched longer, unease began to settle over the group. Her father called out her name, expecting her to come running back with a laugh, maybe complaining that she'd gotten lost for a moment. But there was no response. The camp grew quiet, every ear straining for the sound of footsteps on the trail, every eye searching the tree line. So, nothing. Panic set in. Her father searched the immediate area, his voice breaking as he called her name again and again. Other campers joined in, fanning out toward the lake. But the trail gave no clues. No footprints. No dropped belongings. Just silence. It was as though the wilderness had swallowed her whole. Imagine being Stacy's father in that moment. One second your daughter is beside you, the next she's gone, and every call into the trees goes unanswered. Fear grips you. Do you keep hoping she'll walk back into camp smiling? Or do you accept the chilling truth that something terrible has happened? By nightfall the tension was unbearable. Lanterns flickered around the camp as rangers were notified and the first official search began. But even in those earliest moments, one thing was already certain. Stacy Arras had vanished into thin air. The moment rangers were alerted, Yosemite turned into the site of one of the most intensive searches the park had ever seen. Word spread quickly. A young girl, only 14, had vanished without a trace. By dawn, dozens of people were combing the landscape. Park rangers, trained trackers, volunteers, even helicopters, all working in unison, all believing they would find her within hours. After all, she couldn't have gone far. Could she? The search began where Stacy was last seen, the trail between the Sunrise High Sierra camp and the nearby lake. The earth was soft enough to reveal footprints. Searchers expected to find her small shoe prints in the dirt, maybe leading off the path, maybe down toward the water. But to their astonishment, there was nothing. The ground looked untouched, as though she had never walked there at all. That was the first red flag. People don't simply vanish in broad daylight. Yet here the forest seemed to erase her existence. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades thundering through the stillness. From above, searchers scanned the jagged rocks, the tree canopies, and the sheer cliffs where someone could have slipped or fallen. Every dark crevice and shadowed gorge was checked. On the ground, dogs were brought in, highly trained bloodhounds, their noses capable of following the faintest scent. Handlers pressed them forward, holding Stacy's belongings to their snouts, urging them to find her trail. But the dogs grew restless. They paced, they sniffed, they whined, and then they sat down. They couldn't pick up anything. It was as if Stacy had stepped off the earth. Meanwhile, Stacy's father clung to hope, watching the searchers fan out. Imagine the desperation in his eyes. Every rustle in the bushes, every broken twig could mean his daughter was nearby. But with each passing hour, hope slipped further away. Rangers reassured him, "We'll find her. She couldn't have gone far." Yet as day turned to night, those words felt emptier. Lanterns lit up the camp again, but this time the glow was grim. Searchers returned exhausted, shaking their heads. No sign. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a footprint. Nothing. Day after day the search widened. By the third day, over 100 people were on the ground. Horses were used to cover more distance, scouring meadows and streams. Divers checked the lake, their beams of light piercing the icy water. No body. No clues. Just silence. The search reached a fever pitch. A massive operation that consumed every trail, every ridge, every corner of the wilderness within miles. Yet Stacy had disappeared as if the forest itself had closed around her and refused to give her back. Then came the only clue ever found. Lying on the dirt trail near the spot where Stacy was last seen, was her camera's lens cap. Small, ordinary, almost meaningless, but in this case chilling. It proved she had been there. She had walked that path. She had lifted her camera to take photos. And then, she was gone. To investigators, the lens cap was both a confirmation and a torment. It was the only thread connecting Stacy to the forest, and it led nowhere. Days turned into a week. Helicopters made their final sweeps. Volunteers collapsed in exhaustion. The once hopeful search became a grim recovery mission. Her father remained, holding on to the faintest possibility. Imagine the agony, watching hundreds of people call your daughter's name, only for the echoes to vanish into the trees. Every hour that passed felt like betrayal, as if the wilderness was mocking him, hiding her just beyond reach. And then, reluctantly, the search was called off. Rangers had found nothing. No body, no evidence of an animal attack, no proof of foul play. Stacy Arras had simply vanished, swallowed whole by Yosemite. For the investigators, it was more than failure. It was unexplainable. For her family, it was heartbreak without closure. And for everyone who heard the story, it became one of the most unsettling disappearances in national park history. Decades later, Stacy Arras's disappearance remains one of the strangest and most haunting unsolved cases in Yosemite's history. How can a 14-year-old girl visible on a trail within shouting distance of her camp vanish in broad daylight without a single trace? To this day, no one has the answer. But the theories are as unsettling as the silence she left behind. Some believe the simplest answer is the most likely. Stacy slipped and fell. The trails around Sunrise Camp are steep, with jagged cliffs and hidden crevices. One misstep could have sent her tumbling down into a ravine invisible from above. Searchers scoured these areas, but Yosemite is vast and unforgiving. It's possible her body came to rest in a place even the helicopters and dogs couldn't reach. Nature has a way of concealing its secrets. And yet, if that were true, why has no sign of her ever surfaced in more than 40 years? Not a shoe. Not a bone. Nothing. Others point to something darker. Stacy was last seen with another man from the group, an older hiker who briefly walked with her before turning back. Could he have followed her? Could someone else have been waiting near the lake? Abductions in national parks are rare but not impossible. What makes this theory chilling is the lack of evidence. If someone had taken her, wouldn't there be signs, footprints, broken branches, a scream? Yet the forest was silent. Some believe the abduction was so swift, so calculated, that she simply vanished into human hands before anyone realized. But to this day, no suspect has ever been named and no witness has come forward. Yosemite is beautiful, but it also has a reputation. A long history of disappearances, accidents, and unsolved cases. Stacy's case is often linked in whispers to these stories. Some theorists suggest a pattern, an unexplained phenomenon lurking within the park. Was it a wild animal that left no trace? Or something stranger, something the wilderness hides from us? These ideas may sound far-fetched, but to those who knew Stacy, the complete lack of evidence feels just as impossible. A smaller group of voices raise an unsettling possibility, that Stacy chose to leave. She was only 14, yes, but what if she wandered farther than anyone imagined, disoriented by the vastness of the forest? A wrong turn could have led her deeper into the wilderness, where survival was impossible. But again, the search covered miles in every direction. If she had walked away, why didn't the dogs pick up her scent? Why didn't anyone see her from the air? Every theory leaves more questions than answers. If she fell, why hasn't she been found? If she was taken, how did it happen so cleanly? If it was an animal, why no evidence of an attack? And if she walked away, how did she cover so much ground without being spotted? The only thing investigators agree on is this: Stacy Arras's disappearance defies explanation. For her family, these theories are both torture and comfort. Each one offers a possible truth, but none offers closure. Imagine decades passing, clinging to the thought that maybe she's still out there, or worse, that she died in fear and alone. Every unanswered question is a wound that never heals. For visitors to Yosemite, her story is a haunting reminder. Beauty and danger often share the same path. It has now been more than 40 years since that warm summer afternoon in 1981, yet the shadow of Stacy Arras's disappearance still hangs heavy over Yosemite. Every year, thousands of hikers pass through Sunrise High Sierra Camp, retracing the same steps Stacy once took. They see the narrow trail, the rocky slopes, the still waters of the lake, and they can't help but wonder, how could a 14-year-old vanish here in full view of her group without leaving a single trace? The official search ended in heartbreak. Rangers, hardened by years of rescues and tragedies, admitted they had never encountered a case so baffling. Some of them never stopped thinking about it. A few returned on their own years later, hoping erosion or time might reveal her remains. But Yosemite remained silent. It was as if the forest itself had decided to keep her secret. For Stacy's father, the agony was unimaginable. He came to Yosemite with his daughter to share an adventure, and he left without her, forced to descend the mountain alone. Friends and relatives describe a man haunted, not just by loss, but by the cruelest wound of all: uncertainty. How do you mourn someone when you never get to say goodbye? As time passed, Stacy's case became more than just a disappearance. It became a warning. Parents began telling their children not to wander too far on the trails. Rangers whispered her name when discussing the dangers of overconfidence in the wilderness. And yet there are still no answers. No clothing. No bones. Nothing to mark where Stacy Arras drew her last breath. And so the questions echo louder with each passing year. Did she stumble into an unseen ravine? Was she taken by someone who saw opportunity in her brief moment alone? Or was it something stranger? Something that defies logic the way the wilderness sometimes does? Yosemite is breathtaking, but it is also unforgiving. The granite cliffs, the endless forests, the silence, they hold stories we may never uncover. Stacy's story lingers as one of the most haunting reminders that nature, for all its beauty, can be merciless. Sometimes it doesn't just take lives, it swallows them whole, leaving behind only questions and grief. For decades later, Stacy Arras has never been found. No resolution. No closure. Just a girl who walked into the wilderness and became part of its mystery. And that, perhaps, is the most chilling ending of all. So what do you believe really happened to Stacy Arras? Was it an accident, an abduction, or something beyond explanation? Drop your theories in the comments. Maybe your insight will shed new light on this decades-old case. And if stories like this keep you awake at night, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Because the next mystery may be even closer than you think.